every time with Rob Browne breaking it all down. Yeah. SEC, sideline sports on my mind. Rob Browne calling game time, highlight shine, executive mind. Brenden Martin keeping Rob in line. Like, subscribe, share it, tell everyone. Sideline sports, y'all come back real soon. Same place, same time, same tune.
Cool.
I know. I'm pretty cool.
Yeah, it is a cool day. You are cool with the Richard Petty's on this morning. I love them.
These are Tom Cruise, okay?
Yeah.
I don't have my petties. These are my aviators, brah. Jake Wembley knows what's up with that.
JW does, and we got Jay. Look, we got a great show today. They're all great, or we don't do them. Hey, it is a Tuesday, April 14th, the day before April 15th. We know that's tax day. If you can't do it, you better file an extension. A lot going on. Jake Wembley, ESPN 105.9, the afternoon drive from Jackson, Mississippi. Folks, put that app on your phone. Follow him. Listen to him. Does a great show. It's just stacked with information and numbers. We've also got Franz Beard, the Iron Duke, as Buddy calls him. The Golden Season, $39.95. It's a great book. He wrote it. He chronicles basketball. He and Kevin Skarbinski, the two best basketball writers that I know personally, but they're in the top 5 in the world. They may be top 1 and 2. We'll also have the Yancey Porter Rebel Yell Hotline in Oxford checking in as well. We are streaming live.
Love Yancey Porter.
Love him, Yancey. On video, restream. We got restreaming. We're live streaming on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, X, and Instagram. 9 channels live. And look,
just subscribe,
subscribe, share it, and like it. Once this show starts, share it with your friends and amigos. We appreciate so much the growth we're experiencing, and because we have great team, great producer. And Jake, numbers wise, welcome aboard. I know this is a great time of year. We just finished basketball. We got college baseball going on, high school baseball. You live in the baseball state of America. You know, they talk about the crabs in Maryland. They talk about the lobsters in Maine, but baseball in the state of Mississippi. And if you're an LSU fan, you might want to leave a little earlier than you did the other day and get an early Swayze shower. But how you doing?
Swayze shower.
Man, we're good. You're right. We're right in the middle of baseball. A lot of baseball in the state, from what's going on in Starkville and Oxford and Hattiesburg down to, Belhaven and Delta State. A lot of high school action. I've got a big one to call here in the state of Mississippi tonight. Big 7A matchup tonight. So it's a lot of baseball, but football is always right there and present.
Yeah, it is. And I got to ask you this. When you start looking at, to me, Ole Miss and Mississippi State baseball and Southern Miss, you have to include them in that conversation. Real quick, I've always followed Southern Miss. You know, you and I and Brenden, we grew up. They were a real problem. And then USA came along. Tulane starts emphasizing football. What's the drumbeat? Are they just, hey, we're going to make football as good as we can, but we can be a real power in baseball?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if you look at it, Southern Miss is committed to baseball. They've got a really good coaching staff. They've got money around that program, and they do a great job working the state of Mississippi and getting a lot of the top tier kids that maybe didn't make an SEC school. So they've done a great job of it. It's a lot of people say they got a lot of dirt bags, right? A lot of guys that can play baseball, and they're a thorn on a lot of people's sides. You know, the problem with somebody like Southern Miss is they just don't have the pitching depth that a lot of these schools have. So that can get them in a quagmire on a weekend. But Southern Miss takes on Ole Miss tonight, a midweek game here in the capital city, right outside there in Pearl at Trustmark Park. So that place will be full for Southern Miss and Ole Miss tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it really is really cool to watch. Dudy Noble Field, Swayze Field up in Oxford. Just the growth of college baseball has been off the charts. Look into football right now. We're listening to our friend Chuck Oliver yesterday. I like to listen to him either live or I listen on the delayed podcast. He and Heath Klein. He had his top 5 coaches. He said, there were 5 coaches last year that went to SEC Media Days, and that was their last one. We all know those 5. And this year, he had Jeff Lebby on his list of coaches who this might be their last Media Days. What's going on in Starkville to make you think, nope, not so fast, as Lee Corso would say?
It's going to be tough. I mean, you look at the schedule. The 9th game is going to hamper everybody to some degree. Look, they're going to have good quarterback play with Kamario Taylor. They're going to have good wide receiver play. Jeff Lebby always does. They'll have some running backs that can move and shake and wiggle, and they feel really good about the defense under Zach Arnett. But it's going to come down to, can they block it? That's been the problem for Jeff Lebby. Defense has been a problem. He feels like he's addressed that with Zach Arnett, and then offensive line play. What is that going to look like in a schedule that's really layered with week in and week out of an SEC grind? So what is that magic number for Jeff Lebby to be back? Us talking about Jeff Lebby next year at this time. Is it 6 wins? Is it 7? I have no idea. But one thing is for sure is they need to at least win half of their games this year, I think, or he's in big trouble.
Well, I think about, defensively, your coach played at, University of New Mexico. I think he's a Lobo. And I'm looking at Jeff Lebby and going, wow, the DNA and his offensive pedigree, if you go back when Mike Leach tragically died and Zach Arnett took over and he completely changed the offense, that was a mistake, but he can flat out coach defense. Talk about the line of scrimmage for Mississippi State offense, defense, what you see.
Yeah, I think, again, with the transfer portal being so fluid, it's finding the right mixture. They feel like they've identified some guys that can play on the front 7. That would be guys that can play in the trenches. It can be run stoppers, guys that can be pass rushers, some linebackers that can cover in space. And again, what does that collection of talent look like as far as, hey, who are the Jimmies and the Joes? I don't think anybody really knows that yet. Mm-hmm. Defensively in the secondary, they've got to play a little better. Again, offensive line's the question, and we won't know until we see it. Again, Lebby talks about, hey, look, there's been some gains made at that spot, but what does that mean? I mean, especially when you've got, trips to Georgia or Texas or Oklahoma or wherever it may be. I mean, are those units going to be good enough week in and week out to, really weather a storm of a 4-game stretch or a 5-game stretch? That's yet to be determined.
All right. Looking now at the SEC, you look at the top teams right now that are getting the most attention, 9+ wins. There's only 2 of them on most lists, and that's Texas and Georgia. Keep in mind, Texas and Georgia have played 3 times the last 2 seasons. Georgia's 3-0 in those matchups. Everyone thinks because Arch Manning's a year older, they're going to win it all again. Gunnar Stockton's back for another year as well.
No, he is. And look, Steve Sarkisian really likes his team. He's been very vocal about it. He said something on 3 Sports about a month ago, said, hey, look, we've got players across the board. We've got depth at every position. And Texas does. I mean, they've got those household names, those big-time players, but Georgia does as well. It'll be interesting to see if it is, in fact, Georgia and Texas, or does somebody else come along, maybe in Oklahoma. Maybe we'll see what Ole Miss does. Is it Lane Kiffin at LSU? Maybe Alex Golesh at Auburn, really reignites that program. I mean, there's a lot of great storylines of kind of, the teams that are there in the SEC, Georgia and Texas. Does Ole Miss stay afloat? Can Lane Kiffin bring back LSU? And then you look like at what Summerall's doing at Florida, Golesh out at Auburn. There's a lot of great stories in the SEC of some rebirth, and then some of the mainstays.
All right, Texas A&M, Elko. He proved last year they got 11 wins, lost the last game to Texas, and then in the playoffs, Miami, wasn't a high-scoring game. What was it, 10-7? Wasn't a terrible loss. Is Elko the coach that A&M has been looking for since a long time? I mean, R.C. Slocum had a good 14 years after Jackie Sherrill, but it hadn't been that consistent since then.
Yeah, I think he may be. I mean, when you look again, you get to the college football playoff, you lose to Miami by 3 points. It was a low scoring game, 10-7. Elko has shown he can identify talent. He knows how to work this NIL and this transfer portal pay for play system. Texas A&M is loaded on both lines of scrimmages. They've got skill talent. They've got a quarterback that they really believe in. And look, I think this is going to be one of the better teams in the country. And again, when you go look at kind of their schedule, it kind of lends itself to a schedule where they should be in the conversation in the Southeastern Conference in late October and November.
Yeah. All right, let's go up to Columbia, Missouri. Eli Drinkwitz has won Missouri 29 games the last 3 years. Okay, put that in perspective. Going back to 2013 season, LSU since then has had one 11-win season. Auburn's had 11-win seasons. I think Missouri's done it more than once. Now, people will tell you that Ole Miss and Missouri the last few years have benefited from an easier, that's a relative term, SEC schedule. That's supposed to flip this year. Austin Simmons was supposed to be the next great one at Ole Miss, gets hurt. Now he's the starting QB at Missouri. What happens in Columbia?
Yeah, Drinkwitz is a guy that I don't know that we give enough credit to what he has done at that program. And again, a lot of people are going to look at that schedule. They've been able to facilitate, good quarterback play. They feel like they've got a good one with Austin Simmons. And look, what's interesting about Austin Simmons, and we were sitting here last year talking about Austin Simmons saying, hey, look, he could be better than Jackson Dart, or at least we felt like at Ole Miss. And then he goes down and Trinidad Chambliss happens, and the rest is history. For Missouri, they've got to continue to get that good quarterback play. They're going to have skill talent. They've got a schedule at least early this year with UAPB, Kansas on the road, Troy, at Mississippi State before they get into a run of Florida, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and kind of go down that gauntlet where they'll be in that conversation early. The question is for Missouri is what kind of depth do they have? When they start getting into a schedule, kind of that meat of the schedule, Florida, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Texas on the road, or should be Texas in Columbia, at Georgia. What does that team look like in that stretch? And I think we're going to ask that question about a lot of SEC teams because most teams have those kind of stretches, those 4 or 5 game stretches.
Yep, and I'll tell you what I see a return of this year is the running back in the SEC, starting with Ahmad Hardy, another overlooked Mississippi high school product who started with John Hartwell and Vincent Bryant down at ULM. Now back, he's one of the hardest running backs you will see in college football. Jaden Ball at Florida, Nate Frazier at Georgia. He runs mad, angry. Other running backs, Jeremiah Cobb at Auburn, finally out of Catholic there in Montgomery. You pick the schools, Kuwan Lacey at Ole Miss. I mean, can you remember this many stud running backs? Is that going to change how the league plays this year?
It's a lot of good names, a lot of really good backs. And of course you start, I think, in Oxford with Lacey. Does it change the way the SEC plays? Maybe just a little bit. I mean, maybe you're seeing the SEC get back to more of a line of scrimmage type of game, or at least trying to do that. That's one of the things that you look at the Big Ten and, you go back the last 3 years, quarterback play, as mentioned it, JJ McCarthy at Michigan when they won it, Ohio State's quarterback play. You look at Fernando Mendoza at Indiana, but one of the things that separated those 3 teams versus the SEC is their line of scrimmage play. Yep. And if you go back and watch Indiana this past year, they were very good in the pitch catch game, but when they needed to run the football, they could run it, and they were very physical. And I think you're going to see that element. I think the SEC knows they've got to get back to that, especially if they want to make runs in November, December, and into January. It looks that way.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone will ever forget watching the Indiana players coming up and just dominating Alabama in the Rose Bowl 38-3. I mean, just throwing them around like rag dolls. That shouldn't happen, we would think. But, of course, Ryan Grubb comes back from Seattle. As Pete Cordelli said on here, he was out at Seattle because the Seahawks couldn't run the football. Then he comes to Alabama, no accident. Alabama has their worst rushing attack since 1957 when venerable old coach, and I think he should have been given a long-term contract, J.B. Ears Whitworth was the coach at Alabama. And the guy that followed him, Paul W. Bryant, worked out well.
No, he did. He absolutely did. No, he did. And look, it's going to be interesting to see, that's going to be one of the bigger storylines of the year. We won't know it until we get there is, has the Big Ten – and I'm sure you guys have talked about it. Has the Big Ten overtaken the SEC? Yeah. And, look, I talk a lot about it. We talk a lot about the similarities to two. A lot of the people that listen to my show, they call me a Big Ten homer. Not a Big Ten homer at all. I do admire the way the Big Ten has been able to capitalize over the last few years. And, look, they're playing really good football, and they're going to have a really good football conference this year.
Yeah. Let me just say for the record, Jake, I've known you now for like 4 years. They don't find many Big Ten homers in Rankin, Mississippi. Okay.
No.
What you are is you're fair and objective. You're a civil engineer. You think things through. I tell you what, I don't like bringing people on the show that if I say, hey, does the dress make me look fat? They better tell you the truth. You're a truth broker. You're right up there with Roman Harper. What we try to do, I think the Big Ten has because they've done a better job of managing the players they've got. They've got a lot of money. Money's not the issue. If that were the case, Texas and Texas A&M would have rings everywhere, wouldn't they?
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. I mean, look, there's a lot of money in the Big Ten. We know that. I mean, just look around that league from Oregon to Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan. You can go kind of through that conference, but there's a lot of money in the SEC too. And to your point, if money was the end all be all, Texas would have already won 2 or 3. Texas A&M would have won 2 or 3. There's some other schools that you could say that too. So I just think it's, right now the Big Ten has a little better coaching. They've had actually better quarterback play at the highest level. And then they've been a better line of scrimmage league than the SEC. But it's all relative. It moves and shakes. And look, you could see Texas, Georgia, maybe LSU, pick another 2 or 3, where the SEC is littered throughout the playoff this year, 4 or 5 teams. And then the SEC may, turn this thing back the other way.
Yeah. And, Bobby Bowden once said, if discipline were everything in college football, then why aren't Army and Navy playing for the national championship every year? Dadgummit. Think about that.
Bobby was a truth teller too, wasn't he? Kind of. Brenden,
until one of his players got in trouble. You better watch out with Brenden. Brenden, please don't pull the plug on the show.
Yeah, no, I got to be careful there. No,
come on. He's, we got to be with him, all that stuff. He was an amazing coach, gave us a lot of great memories. So,
yeah. I mean, he made college football fun, JW.
Oh, my God.
He did. No, he did. I don't think we have some of those characters like that. I mean, the days of Spurrier, Bowden, Lou Holtz. We had some characters. We got really good coaches now. I think that's why you see social media gravitate to, and I know we took a hard left turn here, but talking about coaches, but like when you look at the way the media really just kind of fell in love with what's going on at Indiana. Yeah. And, every shot was their head coach, and every shot was, how his face looked and this look. It's because, we don't have those characters anymore in college football.
No.
And Kurt Cignetti brought 15 guys from James. He was 52-9 at James Madison. He won big at Elon over in North Carolina and at Indiana University, Pennsylvania. Before that, he was recruiting coordinator at Alabama under Nick Saban. No accident that he's successful. All right, Jake.
Jake, before you go, but don't you think that, Rob, sorry, but don't you guys think that, not that they created a different element, I just think you had to have, things were different. Rules were different, right? You had to get different outcomes. I'm a big picture thinker because, that's how I do things, right? So it's like, well, how does this all work together? And how do we get everyone going in the right direction, right? So it's like, well, a lot of people say, well, Saban would have not been so effective now, or Meyer might not be so effective now because things were different. They had to, they set up their own scheme, right? And then what's the scheme? They set their system up, and that worked.
Yeah.
And that's fine, right? That was the game. I just, it's sort of tailored to the personality of what and we're searching for that. Like Lane Kiffin was poison a la 15 years ago, and all the, we know the stories, and then now he's the second coming, right? So it's like, okay, so we
in some places.
Well, look, if he was single right now and looking for a place to work, a lot of people would be loving him because we just saw that. So he's like, but we're looking for the next, who's going to be the next coach or that style of coach, because we think this summer all these guys are going to be great. But we thought that about Billy Napier and all that stuff too, right? I'm not knocking anybody.
Yeah, Jay, I want to hear that.
You gotta prove it in the SEC, a la Texas. Welcome to the SEC. I know that was the first time, like you get stung, and I know everyone's SEC sucks. All this. Look, I'm just talking to a real SEC Big Ten guy. You get it. I just wanted you to comment if that's possible, because I just ADD'd all over the place.
There's a question in there somewhere. I get to say that.
No, but it is. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I do.
This is tailored to the personality. You got to look for that kind of personality. So we were, the Spurriers and all those guys were great, but they were motivators that way. They used the media to motivate more often. Now we don't talk as much. They use different outlets per that.
Yeah.
But totally. No one's really but then we look around and old school football is killing it, and we see that this last year. So anyways, comment, tell me to shut up or whatever.
Yeah. I'm curious because he's right. You got to have a personality, but you better connect to your fans. everybody's worrying about guys leaving in the
In
portal.
this era,
You better retain your fan bases, or they're going to hit the portal.
In this era.
Yeah.
No, there's no doubt. It's a different era for sure. Every coach that's come through, I mean, they had, like you said, Brenden, they had their own challenges. They had their own issues. And those universities at that time, they identified the guys that were right fits for their fan bases, their alumni, for their teams. And, teams are going to have to continue to do that moving forward.
Yeah. You know what fan retention
we
is?
see that too. And I guess it's like we see it with media. We see what the importance on creating entire film departments now for your football team,
But,
and, to handle your own marketing and all that stuff.
But I'll throw something at you. They're going to lay off like 25 people, I think, at Cal in their marketing and media department. So Franz Beard's going to join us here in a minute. But hey, Jake, I know you got to go to another show here in a second. But what Brenden just said, fan retention. You know what fan retention's all about? Just win. You'll keep your fans. But they're also tired of the kids coming and going for a cup of coffee, as Chuck says.
Yes.
That's irritating. What's the number one thing y'all are talking about on your afternoon show? Let them know how they can follow you, and we got to get you back on more often. I love having you on.
No, let's do it. I'm always here. Just let me know. Mississippi State baseball right now. Can the Dogs rebound? 2 straight weekends, 2 straight sweeps. That's been the big story. Obviously, we'll talk baseball, football today. Catch us 3 to 6, or we're actually be on 3 to 5:30. Get out of the way for Mississippi State baseball tonight. As you can find that on 105.9 FM, the FM dial here in Mississippi, or the zone1059.com.
Joe, you know what I love the most about you?
He's got to go, Robert.
I know, but on high school sports, because without them, we got nothing, man. Jake, thank you. You're awesome.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Franz Beard, the man with the hat, an authority on. I mean, Franz. You remember George Plimpton? They used to do those commercials, the Bon Voyant wearing his ascot that used to do the commercials. He was kind of a man of all things. That is you, Franz Beard. But you're a great writer, a great author, and a great man. You're wise beyond what we normally see. The Gators had a spring game.
Old, so don't say I'm wise beyond years.
Well, but I mean, you're wise.
That was a new one.
I'm a member. I have reached old fartitude.
No, you're not. No, Franz. Gators had a spring game Saturday. 47,000 people showed up at the Swamp. And I know you've been to a lot of them, but the Fighting Summeralls, the strength and conditioning coach, everyone on his staff is invested in pushing these players. Like he says, if you don't like being pushed to the max and getting out of your comfort zone, you're not going to enjoy playing for me. We need more of that instead of coddling these kids and enabling them to act like immature brats. I mean, and they need to. I think he's one. If you're not committed to Florida, don't stay. And I think Jaden Ball is going to be the leader of that Gator team. Right or wrong?
Well, I think that I think the Gators are going to be very, very good. 7 games, 8 games possible, good. And the reason I think they're going to be is because they brought in a coach who essentially exudes confidence, number one, and number two, he's no nonsense. He's made it abundantly clear that if you like to work hard, if you like to be pushed, you're welcome here. If you don't like those things, if you can't take constructive criticism, if you can't take a coach in your ear telling you can do one more, when you're in that weight room, etc., then go. You don't need to be here because this is what we're going to do. I was listening to Jake a little bit ago as you were coming out, and here's something that Brenden was also touching on. You had coaches like Bear Bryant who reinvented himself 6 times. Yep. People don't realize that. The guy reinvented himself 6 times. Great coaches will win. It doesn't matter their era. They'll adapt to the scheme. The ones that don't fade away. Johnny Vaught never adapted to platoon football. Yeah. When it was one platoon football, you look at what happened with Ole Miss from like 1950 to 1962 when it was single platoon. Ole Miss was fantastic. But then they go 2 platoon football and Ole Miss just faded off into the sunset. You know, the great coaches who understand that the game is always going to evolve. The players are always going to evolve. Now they're bigger, faster, stronger than they've ever been. Steve Spurrier says, you got an issue though now because the field stays the same size. Yeah. So a guy now, there's not as much room to complete, a 15-yard out pass or throw a ball down the seam, etc., like that. So, but the great coaches, the truly great coaches, adapt to their era and they adapt to the players that are coming along. And if we've got a problem in the SEC, it's been we have had coaches that aren't very adaptable, if you ask me.
Yeah, and you're right.
I'll give you an example. Hugh Freeze.
Ugh.
Hugh Freeze, who was terrific at Liberty. He was probably in the element he needed to stay in at Liberty, where he's taking guys that nobody else knows about, etc. Billy Napier at Florida, another one.
Yeah.
At Louisiana, he was terrific because he's getting the leftovers and convincing them, the leftovers, that, hey, we can win and we can do well. And they did at that level. But you don't win with leftovers at Florida. You don't win with leftovers at Auburn. You win with studs. You go get studs. You go get guys that are better than everybody else. It's always going to be a player's game, and the coaches are the ones that have to assemble the players.
Yeah, friends, Yancey Porter's going to join us in just a second from Rebel Y'all Hotline. We're going to get into this, but I'm with you. I look at some coaches, what you see early on, that's who they are. I made a terrible mistake in giving Billy Napier too much credit. I was like, this guy's low energy. He's dull. And that's what I thought. But I was like, well, he'll get better players at Florida. Now, he is what he is. It's hard to change when you're 45 or 50 years old. Zebras don't change their stripes. Just their watering holes. But I missed out on Billy Napier. I would
like to say that I did not.
Yeah, you didn't. Yeah, you weren't a fan.
Debate on Billy Napier.
I thought winning at Lafayette.
I took a lot of crap for it, and I never took the bait on that guy.
Well, I just think that winning at Lafayette at Louisiana doesn't mean you're going to win at Florida. But when you can go from Lafayette,
doesn't mean you're going to win in the SEC.
Yeah, portability of success, as Dave Bartu talks about on this show, CFB Matrix. That's the number one thing. And you go back to Johnny Vaught, national titles at Ole Miss, 59, 60, 62. And he won 196 games, 3 national championships, and 6 SEC titles.
Different
I know.
Now.
And then Coach Bryant.
It doesn't matter now. Because that's the whole point is. It's like the profile of the coaches change. We're in a hybrid mode of these three guys. So we can't talk about the past because the past doesn't serve us.
But it serves as an example of what can or can't happen. Because Coach Bryant, when they changed platoon football in the late 60s, had those 3 years when they won 6 games and they were trying to get rid of him. And then he secretly met with Emory Ballard, Darrell Royal, and brought the wishbone in. And on Friday night in the 71 season, they go out there in the warm-ups at the Coliseum in L.A. running, the I formation or the veer, and then they start the wishbone in Southern Cal. But hey, they still only won the game 17-10. But he reinvented himself, and they won 8 of the next 9 SEC titles, and they won national championships at Alabama in 73, 78,
we'll never
79.
See that again with our current environment.
Well, yeah, you will, because
how in NIL and transfer portal days we're going to see the dynasty.
I'll tell you how you're going to see it. You're going to see it because we're going to go to a 5-for-5. It's going to eliminate the mercenaries.
Exactly.
And that's I
heard that was Gator basketball this year. I'm just saying, tell me how I'm wrong. Show me if we can see it again this year in football. If the Indiana runs it up again, I will tell me I'm wrong. But I'm in the Dave Bartu arena with all this stuff and the numbers and stuff. They're not lying to us.
You can't
we look at that.
All right. You can't, friends. The numbers don't lie. But I think great coaches, successful people. I mean, I see it in business all the time. And Yancey Porter's with us. Successful people adapt. Yancey Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline, folks. Catch it Monday nights at 6 o'clock in the p.m. Central Time on Sports 56 WHBQ in Memphis, and also Super Talk Mississippi. And so you can hear it all over the South if you're honest. And then you can put the app on there. Yancey, we got you on the picture today, like the old days of the news. We're talking with correspondent Yancey Porter in Belgrade. Yancey, thank you for joining us, man. And I'm messing with you. We just love you on video for the reels, man. But we've been talking a lot about, and Fran's made a good point, so did Brenden, about coaches. It's Johnny Vaught couldn't adapt to two platoon football. It was a different era. People will figure this stuff out. We always think this is it. And look at Ole Miss. Pete Golding. Okay, well, Ole Miss will never win like they did with Kiffin. Well, why was Kiffin winning? Didn't Pete Golding and his defense and the way they created opportunities have a lot to do with that success? And good morning. I wish I could say live from the Beacon, but wherever you are, good morning.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, let's give Lane Kiffin credit for building the program up, right? And then Pete Golden's kind of taking the wand and taking it from here. But by all indications, as successful as that season was last year, and let's all forget, they were very fortunate not to have key injuries, and key injuries to the right personnel can derail anybody's season. But this year's team coming up, personnel wise, should definitely be better than last year's.
All right, Kewan Lacey is a kid out of Texas. Kiffin told him when he committed to Missouri, he goes, all right, I'll see you next year. Hell, dreams come true. There are a lot of good backs in the conference this year. Do you look for Ole Miss early on to do anything different to try to feature Kewan Lacey more? Because remember what Zach Arnett did at Mississippi State. He completely 180'd the offense that Mike Leach was running, and he didn't last but 1 year as a head coach. Of course, now he's back as the DC. But do you see Pete Golding trying to continue offensively what Lane Kiffin did? He's got the quarterback. As far as we know, Chambliss is back unless the courts rule against him, which I don't see happening.
Yeah, they've already shut that down. Supreme Court, Mississippi already just dismissed it completely.
All right.
So there's zero chance of it going to court or being overturned before the season. So get that out of the way there. But no, I mean, look, JDB was under Lane when he was at Ole Miss and took that offensive philosophy, which is a blend of that old Baylor veer that Lane took. Lane didn't run this style of offense before he got to Ole Miss. And then he got Jeff Levy a bit over there at Baylor. Learned from their coaches over there. Specifically his father-in-law there at Baylor, and that's what JDB has implemented at Ole Miss. Same thing he ran at East Carolina when he left Ole Miss to become the offensive coordinator over there at East Carolina, and it's going to be very, very similar. The terminology will be a little bit different, but as far as what is going to be highlighted for Lacey or Trinidad or anybody in the offense, is going to be very, very similar offense.
Friends, jump in here with Yancey Porter talking some Ole Miss football.
Well, I like Ole Miss, and I think Pete Golding, he's paid his dues. It's his time now to prove that he's able to do it. I thought he did a great job as the interim head coach per se last year during the playoff. But I think everybody's still going to wonder what might have happened had Lane stuck with him through the playoff. That came pretty close to getting it all the way to the championship game with Pete. But there's still going to be that question there about it. How does he do it over 12 games? We've seen a very nice small sample size. Just like how is John Sumrall going to do it this year? We got a good sample size on him before, but it's not in the SEC. So there's a lot of questions going. I think I like Ole Miss, and it starts we talk a lot about how the quarterback affects everything. And I had somebody the other day say, oh, it's overrated. No, it isn't. It's the single most important position in all of sports.
Yes.
And And if you don't have a guy that can do it, you're in trouble. And your guy better be a guy that everybody on the team loves and respects. Florida had this guy named DJ Lagway last year that everybody admits he's a brilliant talent. But you know what? Now we're hearing him talking about things, and we understand he wasn't loved and respected by his teammates. At Ole Miss, they got a guy that they would run through walls for.
Yeah.
In Trinidad Chambliss. They're going to be good.
Yeah. Let me throw this. Yancey, I remember when Cam Newton was at Auburn, Pat Dye was asked who's the greatest football player you've ever seen. He said, well, Bo, blah, blah. He talked about that. But he said, Cam Newton, the quarterback, touches the ball on every snap. Trinidad, I look at what's going on with Trinidad Chambliss, and you were so, Yancey, I got to give you credit. And folks, listen to him on Rebel Yell Hotline with that crew, Chuck Roundsville, all that. Y'all have followed Ole Miss for so long. You don't drink Kool-Aid. You're not a sunshine pumper. But you called it on Trinidad Chambliss early. This guy is a playmaker, and as Dave Bartu calls him, he's an elevator. He makes everybody around him up their game, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. I mean, it's what separates most quarterbacks in the SEC is what happens when the live bullets come at you, right?
Yeah.
How do you respond? How do you process the coverages? And then God given talent goes with it, but still, those two Mississippi that you count when the bullets are coming at you is what separates the men from the boys, and unfortunately, is what got Simmons in trouble and what makes Trinidad so special.
And you think about Austin Simmons and Franz and Brenden and all these. We got a lot of Gators watching this show. Love them. That's a hell of an athlete. Now he's up at Missouri. Who's the backup? Because that's a question that's got to be asked because nobody saw Trinidad Chambliss coming until Trinidad Chambliss got there. But let's talk about that quarterback room at Ole Miss.
Yeah, man. I think Deuce Knight is really running number twos behind Trinidad right now, ready to kind of carry that torch after Trinidad graduates after next season. And he's dynamic athlete and
Yeah.
just an impressive looking kid. You're talking kid that's close to 6'6". He's up to about 225 pounds now. He's gained about 15 pounds in the weight room in the last few months and really filling out. And so I still think he's a little raw. Reading coverages, schematically wise, maybe even some technique wise. Probably needs a good year of still learning the ropes. But he's got a chance to be special. But it's just a chance.
Yeah. And as far as Ole Miss goes, recruiting in the state of Mississippi, Lane Kiffin was really good at getting the top 5 or 7 players in the state. He did really well. Then he's big in the portal. Is Pete Golding's strategy going to be similar or a 180 from Lane Kiffin when it comes to recruiting?
I think Pete's going to definitely still try to cherry pick the state of Mississippi, but I think you're going to see a little more high school influence. I think Ole Miss last year, if I'm not mistaken, they signed 28, 29 out of the portal, which is still a lot. And I don't expect that to get much less than that, maybe 25, you
Yeah.
know, uh, the bottom line. But I don't think it's going to be in the 40, 45 range, which we saw from Lane each and every year. And we saw from Lane again when he went to LSU. A lot of people predicted that Lane would now have all the high school talent. He would have to recruit high school, wouldn't have to go after the portal near as hard.
Yeah.
But, every year Lane's going to get 40, 45 out of the portal. No matter what he does with the high school, and then the majority of the high school players won't be there after a year or two.
All right, one more question, then back to Franz. Numbers on the Grove Collective. It's one of the most impressive, populist movements I've seen since Robert M. La Follette was the governor of Wisconsin. Populism. It's so big. Over 15,000 members of the Grove Collective. I can see it only getting bigger.
Well, I think the most important thing now is what's revolved is with the committee they have in place that passes the NIL deals.
Okay.
Now it's really shifting really hard towards your corporate contacts you have to get true NIL deals instead of supplementing money through the collectives.
Yeah.
Yes, is that still taking place? Of course it is, but it has become very difficult after talking to several executives throughout the country of these collectives. It's not all about getting a big pool of money in for the collective and distribute that money to the players as it was in the past few years. This committee that has been formed to pass the NIL deals has been very strict. So you have to get very creative with corporations. And I don't know where that's going to take the SEC if they stick to
Yeah.
their guns with this, because obviously there's more population, more corporate businesses outside of the SEC footprint than there is, say it like Big Ten schools,
Uh-huh.
old Pac-10 schools where there's tons of corporate businesses. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Boy, speaking of, I love when you say the Pac-10. I did love the late night Pac-12 games with Bill Walton, but that's another story. All right, friends, you heard what he just said, and Yancey, you remember a few weeks ago they want to not tax the earnings for athletes in the state of Mississippi for NIL. They have, I
That
think
did
Mississippi.
not pass.
Yeah, it did not. Okay, because I think that's a 5% state tax in Mississippi. Florida, on the other hand, Franz, has no state income tax.
Yeah.
That in Texas and Tennessee, the triple tax exempt federal, state, and local. Uh, Franz, looking at Florida, looking at Ole Miss, looking around this league, and we're going to quickly go back and forth. And thanks everybody for watching, whatever Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. Thank you so much. Share it and subscribe. Franz, go around the SEC. What schools do you think right now are walking the green mile because they just can't get they're flightless birds is what we'll call these programs.
Well, South Carolina's in trouble. I mean, I think Shane Beamer's a fine football coach, but he's in trouble. He's at a place that he's not going to get. They don't have the athletes, and they don't have a history of being a garden spot for guys in the portal.
Yeah.
They're in trouble. Mississippi State's in trouble. I hate to say it, guys. But Mississippi State's a baseball school. That's pretty much going to be it. But they're in trouble. I'm not sold on Kentucky going downhill, but I think Kentucky's going to go back into that level of, okay, we made it to the Music City Bowl this year. What a great experience that is. We get to go to Nashville for a weekend, or we get to go to Memphis for the Liberty Bowl.
Come on.
Exactly. And if you're the worst team in the SEC to qualify for a bowl, you have to go to Birmingham, and if you lose, you have to stay an extra week. But you've got these schools like this. I'm wondering how Vanderbilt, how far down they're going to bounce or how far up they're going to bounce. And the reason I say that is because they got a 5-star quarterback. He's a freshman. Okay, that could be good.
Yeah,
could also be. Can he lead like Diego Pavia? Diego Pavia is a guy that had guys willing to take bullets for him.
Yeah,
and we saw in Florida, you have a 5-star quarterback, DJ Lagway, the high school player of the year 3 years ago. And, if somebody pointed a gun at him, they pushed him out there and said, let him go hit him,
Yeah. It's a mess. And Franz, that's that list is, I agree with you. Okay. And Yancey, what Franz just said about looking around the league, who are the critical care patients, the flightless birds, the dodo birds, the kiwi birds of the SEC that they're not embracing this NIL, and they're going to go the way of petroleum.
Well, I think every school in the SEC has the potential to be elite. I really do. Now, what it takes is it takes a president, it takes an AD, it takes your collective as executive, and it takes a great head coach. You got to have all four spokes of the wheel rolling together. If not, it can go down in a hurry. Now, let's be honest. If Ole Miss did not have one of the best chancellors, ads, growth collectors, collectors, excuse me, executives, with Lane that started this, we would probably be putting them in that bunch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But but every school has the money. Every school in the SEC has the money.
Yeah.
It's who can tap into it. And you got to have the right president, number one, to hire the right AD, to hire the right executive to handle that collective,
Yeah.
to hire the right head coach. And if you got all four in place, any school in the SEC can be elite. If you don't, any school in the SEC can go down to the bottom. And
It's
that's the way I see it.
yeah. It's all
I
about alignment, friends. And you
That's
get
that
that
right.
aligned, you're done.
it is, and Yancey's right about having the money. But here's the thing that I think is going to take the certain schools over the top. You have the corporate money because that's where that is. I hate to say it, but that's where we're heading. Uh, we come into
Hmm.
the state of Florida, for example. I can see 3 years from now the Gators with this patch on here says Publix. You know, where shopping is a pleasure. You know, I could see Georgia with drink Coca-Cola, it's the real thing,
Yeah.
etc. like that. I could see Ole Miss, FedEx. We're going there.
Yeah.
I don't. It bugs me. It truly bugs me, but it's where we're going because we have allowed television to really dictate where we're going with the sport because you got to have the television money and it's up the ante for everybody. Yancey just made the point. Because of the television money, this year the SEC distributed $74 million. It is anticipated that within 2 years that ESPN is going to want to rework that contract and where it's going to be, say, $100 million for each school. And $100 million goes farther at Mississippi State than it does at Texas because at Texas, everything's bigger in Texas. They got more teams, more everything like that. Mississippi State doesn't have a gymnastics team, for example, to support. At Florida we got 21 sports, and they're talking about adding another one or two.
That's a rarity because I think we're going to be down to 6 or 7 sports in a few years if we don't change the trajectory we're on. And I'll tell you,
Got to have the corporate money to do it.
yeah, and I can see, guys, a case where, let's say, Yellowwood gets behind Auburn. Auburn changes the nickname from the Tigers to the Fighting 2x4s. It's possibility. And you know what's interesting, guys, that the area of the country where college football is the least popular, New York City, New England, has all the power because that's where the network TV stations are. And, that's a problem. And I think, Yancey, what Franz just said about money and corporate money and all,
Well,
I got a lot of Ole Miss friends that make a lot of money. And it's interesting how some of your biggest donors aren't even Ole Miss people, Yancey. I mean, I'm talking in different businesses that just came to the Grove 20 years ago, fell in love with it. And I'm going to tell you, there's a guy at Ole Miss. I mean, Yancey, you know him from Jackson Prep, I think. Walker Jones played linebacker with my friend Brock Kreitz on the 96 team that ran down Hines Ward in Athens. Walker Jones, that's one of the most impactful hires Ole Miss or any college has ever made. He had 15 years at Under Armour branding that company. Ole Miss and Keith Carter, what they've done is beyond impressive, Yancey. Yancey?
That's what I was talking about, where everything has to be aligned. And it starts, I mean, each one is equally important. Um, I think Florida is a great example. I think they've missed a spoke or two of that wheel, that four spoke wheel for years.
Yeah.
And
Start with the
they've
president.
got endless money to raise, but they haven't had the money of many of the SEC schools to support their athletics from a giving standpoint because they haven't had the right people pushing the buttons. It's there in gobs. They just got to get the right people pushing the right buttons. I
Yeah.
don't think, from talking to the executives of the different collectives from around the country, it's a pretty consensus feeling that this committee that is approving these NIL deals is going to be struck down in courts, that it's not legal. And so I think from their perspective, it's going to go right back to the way it was, where the collectives are directly supplementing the income of these NIL deals. I asked a few if that was wishful thinking or if that's really what they thought. And to consensus, they thought that it's not going to hold up in court. So that's coming next. They're going to strike down that committee from their perspective. And so it's going to come back down again to how committed is your alumni base
Yeah.
to your sports programs
Yeah.
and who can reach out to that alumni base to get that money from those people to get to the sports programs.
Yeah.
And so again, it's going to be that four spoke alignment on that wheel is going to be more important than ever. And that's going to be what really drives the engine for all of these SEC teams.
Yeah. And here's the question, Yancey and friends. I brought this up last week. The state of Florida, 23 million people right now, and it's growing every day. You've got so many transients, and Franz broke down the state of Florida so well, but there's a lot of Midwesterners and Northeasterners that live in Florida. They're physically domiciled in the state of Florida because there's no state income tax. But let's look at the financial part of this. Their money's going back to Penn State or Michigan or Notre Dame or wherever. You've got to find a way to connect with these people in Florida. They're not Florida natives, people that were born and raised there that are all Gator. Find a way to give them some sort of tax incentive and say, hey, I'll give the University of Florida, even though I went to Southern Cal. If you can figure out how to do that, and trust me, the terms of endearment in business follow the money trail, and I think that's going to be a fun one to watch, guys. Can you figure out how to way to incentivize non-Florida traditional Gator people to give, not just to the University of Florida? I guess they can give to any school if it's a state school in the state or private, I guess, friends.
Well, you hit on a good point there about, the state of Florida, the boundaries of Florida are we know what they are.
Tell everybody if has not heard it before.
Florida exists. Florida exists from the Lake County, from the Columbia County line down to the West Palm Beach County line and everything in between. That's Florida. You got North Georgia from Jacksonville to Tallahassee. You got Lower Alabama from Tallahassee to Pensacola. You got Cuba del Norte. You got Northern Israel in Palm Beach County. You got Lower New York in Broward, and then over on the West Coast, you got Southern Quebec in Naples and so forth like that. Florida. People gather and everything. But here's the one thing that Florida does have going for it, and that is the University of Florida indeed is a state school. It is the 5th ranked public school in the country, considered one of the 20 best universities in the country, period. Now, and it's the one school, got veterinary, medicine, law, and engineering all on the same
Only
campus.
6 in the
There's
country.
only about 3.
Only 6 in the country.
Yeah. So it's going to bring people in. But again, we're growing. We've grown 500,000 people have moved to Florida since January. I mean, that's how big it's getting. Florida, the villages. I live 10 miles from the villages.
It's 10 o'clock.
The villages will have a population of 238,000 people to play on their 40 golf courses by the year 2028.
Yeah.
Brenden lives in Ocala, so he knows about the spillover from the villages and top of the world and places like that. I mean, it's Marion County is just absolutely exploding. But here's the thing. Even with all that, money comes, money goes. Yancey's right. There's plenty of money in Florida. There's plenty of money among Florida alums. Florida is one of the 15 largest alumni bases in the country. It's still going to come down to corporate.
It is. And
are you going to be able to do that? Florida dropped the ball years ago. They named it Exact Tech Arena when you founded Gatorade on your campus. Why isn't that the Gatorade Arena?
yeah, I agree. We're about out of time. Yancey, you think about just the guys I know in Memphis that are Ole Miss people. And they're just so excited. You've raised that bar, man. Last season, you were so close to the national championship game. The Grove is now, it's what started tailgating really like it is now in college football.
Yeah.
But in the last minute or so, your thoughts on the feelings of Ole Miss fans? They want more, don't they?
Yeah, man, I hate to call it national championship or bust, but that's what it is. I mean,
There you go.
playoffs is not even in the vocabulary for this fan base for this season. You don't make the playoffs, and that's the biggest meltdown episode in Ole Miss history. This is not even debatable if it's a playoff team. This is a national championship. Anything less than national championship is a major disappointment. That's tough for a first year coach, but that's the reality.
Yeah, I go back to my friend Chris Perkins, Ole Miss fanatic. He goes to every game. He and Big Daddy Chris Lynch. One time he said, "Bobby, we win 6 or 7 games here at Oxford, man. We're so happy." He said, "Y'all Auburn and Alabama fans lose a game, you go into hyper panic mode and ready to run the coach out of town." Well, Perkins, and you're watching, the great bond trader. Try going 7-5 this year. I want to hear your reaction, Perkins, because it ain't happening. But first off, we got to wrap it up. Yancey, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. You're one of the kindest. I know we've had a crazy schedule lately with basketball, but glad having you back. Absolutely appreciate more than you know. Franz, ditto. Nobody can break down the state of Florida like Franz Beard, the Iron Duke, and read his book, The Golden Season, about Florida's national championship season in 25. It's a great read. Executive producer Brenden Martin. He ain't just an EP. He's pretty effing smart. He's very smart. Hey, share it, like it, subscribe. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. Check us out, sidelines.live. We're growing this channel, this network. You got to get a new car, truck, or SUV. Get out there to Landers Ford, where Collierville and Germantown meet on Poplar. Also, I-240 and Mount Moriah. Make it simple. Just ask for Brad Bellamy, the general manager at Landers. Say, "Hey, I heard about you on Sidelines." He'll take you where you need to go. And also, they're right down the street from our good friends at Hewlett & Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville. Love Charles Hall, Raven, JM, Lydia, the whole crew. They got a 50% off sale right now. They've got all kinds. They've got Barber, Filson. They've got 7,000 pairs of men's and women's boots. They've got Genteel clothing from Oxford, Mississippi, I might add. Great looking stuff. And if you need a new roof, don't wait till it's fallen in. mytownroofing.com. And if you have any problems with aches and pains, trouble sleeping, going night-night, hempforpros.com. I took a half gummy last night. I slept like I was 9 years old with no bills or payments or mortgages. It can happen. So look, we'll be back tonight on this channel with the Lowdown with Lauren Meadows at 9 p.m. Eastern. We got Scarbo Knows. We got Buddy Martin Show. So many great shows on this channel. Have a great day, everybody. Appreciate it. See you tomorrow.
Subscribe, share it, tell everyone. Sideline Sports, y'all come back real soon. Same place, same time, same tune.